everyone. I'm Iulia. I'm part of the UiPath Automation Hub product team. And thank you so much, Christina and Rohit, and actually the entire UiPath community for hosting us today. We have this webinar series around the best practices on how to use Automation Hub. And we are quite excited to be able to share this knowledge with you and to hear your feedback on your questions. And talking about questions, we're going to have some time dedicated at the end to take some questions, but feel free to share them during the session. And my colleague Sorin is going to be the MC on the chat, and he will try to answer as many questions as possible directly over there. And at the end, he's going to surface the ones which are the most relevant to be taken live, and I'll answer those. The topic for today, before closing this first 4 sessions around the best practices, is around the part where we can communicate and do reporting on top of the Automation Hub data, with a focus on showcasing what is the potential of the automation program. So while I'm going to present the various slides or the examples from the application, do keep in mind that some items that we're going to present today, maybe I'm going to use some words around potential estimations, might happen, plans. So be aware of the fact that everything is subject to change. For today, I'm going to start with explaining a bit why do we need reporting in the context of managing an automation program, and especially using Automation Hub to facilitate the step. What are the ways in which we can report on top of the Automation Hub data? I'm going to focus a lot on the Automation Hub and Insights Cloud integration as a means of achieving this goal of reporting around the potential of your automation program, while talking about the benefits of this integration, the prerequisites, examples of out-of-the-box dashboards, while afterwards we progress towards some use cases. And I'm going to show you how you can create some custom views on top of some of those use cases. Then we're going to close with just a reminder of the next 3 sessions that are going to happen and the dates that already Rohit communicated. And then we're going to close with a Q&A based on what questions are you going to ask. Now, when we started with the first session a few weeks ago, maybe was it like 6 weeks ago, I was mentioning about this purpose of Automation Hub, which enables the organizations who are engaging in automation programs to go and discover what to automate. It enables the RPA COEs to actually manage the opportunities in one place. And moreover, we have this part where, thanks to the capabilities that we have in Automation Hub, you can build a solid business case that will help you into projecting the ROI that you can obtain from automating something, as well as enable you to prioritize easier. And ultimately, the idea is to build as many automation as you can, whether those are attended, unattended, hybrid, and encourage your users to use those automation as much as possible. These are the pillars on which we rely: the enterprise community workspace, the management of the opportunities from your pipeline, as well as the consumption facilitated for the automation store. But one of the things that we heard from the customers, and this is a constant thing since we launched the product 3 years ago, is that while you're collecting ideas, while you're optimizing the way you manage those opportunities, build the business cases for them, prioritize, facilitate the development and the go-to production for those automation and the consumption, during these various phases in the life cycle of the opportunities, there's a constant need to be able to report on the performance of your automation program. And I'm not just talking about performance of your automations which are being orchestrated in Orchestrator, and we can do already that today with Insights, but I'm talking about the things around healthiness of your pipeline. How big is the potential of your pipeline in terms of promised or estimated benefits? What would be the impact? How engaged are your users? All these kind of questions are things that we hear from the customers as being a need. Because if you cannot prove the impact of your program, if you cannot prove the potential, then it will be much more difficult to actually continue obtaining financing for your automation program. And why not even targeting to scale the program by, enriching your team, having more support from the leadership for it. So when we thought about Automation Hub, we said this should not be just the platform, the means through which you can extend your automation program. We should also facilitate the way you do the reporting. And at the beginning, we started by providing some built-in capabilities. As early as 2019, when the product was launched, we have basically a set of pre-built dashboards, pre-built reports, including the automation pipeline view, which now gives you a lot of power into surfacing all that custom information you're tracking, that metadata, those custom KPIs that you're defining in Automation Hub. You can use all these capabilities, from Automation Hub to already get a glimpse on the healthiness of your automation program. But beyond that, of course, there's a need to customize what we can report on, like customize those visualizations, because maybe the needs and the business questions vary from one organization to another. So that's why, as an investment we did for 2022 was actually to integrate Automation Hub with Insights in the first iteration solely on the cloud versions of the products, because Insights is the analytics tool in the UiPath platform that gives you so much power into creating those custom views that you need. And we're going to focus on this one today. But also, there is this open API layer we have exposed in Automation Hub since 2021, and we are constantly enriching such that we can give you the possibility to extract your data and use it however you want. So if you want to also use an alternative to this Insights integration, you can also consider leveraging the open API layer to extract the information that you need and build reports and visualizations on top of that. More on this last part, my colleague is going to, Sorin is going to touch on this in the session 5 that we're going to have, on the Automation Hub Best Practices webinar series, where he's going to talk more generally about the open API layer and how you can use it actually to integrate Automation Hub with third-party applications. But today, as I was saying, I'm going to focus on the integration between Automation Hub and Insights, and a bit the reasoning on why are we providing it. So as I was saying, Automation Hub relies on some pillars around creating an enterprise community workspace where people can contribute with new ideas, with business information, with feedback around the utility, around the relevance of the automations which are built. Also, we are having this pillar for managing the automation opportunities in an easier way for the members of the Center of Excellence, as well as facilitating the consumption via the automation store, where you can expose attended automations relevant to be consumed by your employees. And on the other side, we have Insights, which I hope you're already familiar with, but basically Insights is the product, the component that helps you measure the performance and the impact of your automation program with easiness. It first started as exposing, the orchestrator data and help you have access to these dynamic dashboards where you can see, how are your robots performing? Where are those executions failing? And build on top of that visualization such that you can optimize the operational side for running those automations. But also Insights enabled us through this integration with Automation Hub to surface a data model containing key information from your Automation Hub, and building on top of that a set of predefined dashboards, as well as giving you access to build whatever you want on top of that information. So what we had in mind, and this still represents our North Star, is that thanks to this integration, we are going to enable you to maximize the return on investment for your automation program. Because through these pre-built dashboards that give you instant awareness on where is your automation program, through customization capabilities such that you can use that data exposed in Insights to build custom views relevant for your business, through the possibility of having access to the estimated return on investment, estimated benefits that you keep track in Automation Hub, as well as the execution data from Orchestrator, in the end to obtain an ROI end-to-end traceability thanks to this integration. Now, of course, why did we invest in this, and why do we believe that this brings you value as a customer? Well, I like the idea of having a holistic reporting. While having reporting in the context of Automation Hub and within Automation Hub is great, if you don't actually have the same reporting exposed in a centralized way where you can connect the dots with what's happening in Orchestrator, then you're kind of missing on this holistic perspective. Also, thanks to this data that we're exposing in Insights, the information you're having access to should help you improve the performance and the speed into surfacing new opportunities, accelerating the life cycle of those automation opportunities, because you can view relevant information, you can see bottlenecks, and you'll be able to take actions based on that. Everything is a continuous thing where you can continue iterating. And last but not least, through the increased engagement, you have the possibility of viewing like how are your users engaged into contributing into your in Automation Hub, in the automation program. How are they using that information? Are there any success stories that we can surface and you can replicate in other areas of your business, such that again you can encourage the scaling of the automation program? Now, with that in mind, we provide out of the box, and I'm going to walk you in the demo, a set of dashboards that are pre-built on top of the Automation Hub data. And there are 3 dashboards. The first one focuses on some key statistics around the evolution of your ideas, of your pipeline. So it gives you a perspective on how many ideas were submitted and what were the estimated benefits for those ideas that haven't reached the point of becoming live yet, as well as a pre-filter view on the ones that already reached the point of becoming live. Then we are going to see together that there are some statistics around like the split of your pipeline based on categories, based on who was the submitter and their business unit, based on the various sources that you're using for submitting ideas, distribution by phase and status, as well as some information around how many users connected in Automation Hub and how many of them contributed in various ideas. The second out-of-the-box dashboard focuses on some data around the phase and status changes, and we call it the aging report. It contains, again, a set of predefined views, starting with a summary indicating, how many ideas are stuck in certain phases and for how long, so how much time it has lapsed since they were moved the last time, like their phase and status has progressed the last time. Of course, the longer the time, the worse. Then you have like a view for a breakdown, as well as a very granular view per idea where you can see what's the current phase and status and for how long it has been in there. The third out-of-the-box dashboard that we provide focuses on the evolution of your usable components layer. So if you're using Automation Hub and you're driving value from the usable components part, where you can surface snippets of code that can be reused, and you actually curate those code and you expose them for your developers to use them, then this reusable components template, again, gives you a brief view on how many components were submitted, how many of them are currently in curation, how many of them are live, what is the split by type, what applications are referenced in those components, what was the trend for submitting them, and this kind of key information. But before progressing towards showing you a demo on how that one looks like, there are some recommendations on how to use this integration. So the first step is actually to enable this integration. Okay, I'm going to show you how we do it. It's being done from Automation Hub, and that's actually at this point the only experience that sits within Automation Hub. Then our recommendation is to go and deep dive into the out-of-the-box dashboards that we provide. I mentioned 3 of them. And the idea of deep diving should enable you to understand what is the data model on top of which we build those dashboards. How is the data composed? How did we create those views? So it's like a starting point for you to experiment and, of course, to get a glimpse on the healthiness of your program. Then the next recommendation is to start either by copying those out-of-the-box dashboards and basically creating a local copy that you can iterate on, you can customize, or just start from scratch and create a new dashboard. And the last step that we recommend is actually start iterating on customizing those dashboards by building your own visualizations and up to the point where you're feeling satisfied with what you obtain. Now, this is not necessarily an easy learning curve, but it's something that, based on the customer feedback, we heard that it's something as easy to digest, even easier than using a Power BI tool, for instance. And when I was saying that, you have to also be aware of some prerequisites. For instance, as I was saying earlier, this integration is available while you're using an Automation Cloud account organization. The Automation Hub and Insight services need to be enabled and used on the same tenant. We don't mention that for now, Singapore and Canada tenants, we don't provide this integration yet. It's something we're currently working on. Then you do need to be aware of the permissions needed in order to use these capabilities. First of all, you need to be a system admin in Automation Hub, such that you can trigger the integration or disable it if the need. And in order to consume the dashboards, you either need viewer rights, if it's just a matter of viewing those dashboards, but if you need to customize, if you want to drill down even more, explore the content behind, they need to have designer and ROI editor rights in Insights. because some of the data that you have access to is sensitive one, hence the need for the ROI editor type of role. Of course, the more data you have in Automation Hub, the more meaningful the dashboards will be, no matter if we're talking about the out-of-the-box dashboards or if we're talking about dashboards that you create for your own needs. And of course, it's nice to have previous experience with Insights Cloud or in general with any kind of Power BI tool or reporting tool. Not necessarily because it will require, like to have SQL knowledge or things like that, but it's more like if you're having this perspective of building reports, then it will become easier and easier for you to ramp it up on creating your custom views. And because I was mentioning about showing you how this one looks like, I'm gonna progress in the application. And first, I'm gonna show you how you can enable or disable the integration. So if you're a system admin in Automation Hub, you go in Admin Console in the platform setup, and you have this Insights connection entry under the platform setup. You do have an intro here explaining the purpose of this integration, what does it enable you to do, as well as some useful links towards the documentation where you can view a more granular perspective on the data model and how it can be used. In here, the experience is quite simple. You just have a toggle on, toggle off for this integration. In my case, it's being already connected. And what happens is that the first time you trigger it, you'll have to wait for approximately 1 hour to have the data sent in towards Insights. Afterwards, the data refreshes every hour, like top of the hour. So be mindful of the part where it's not real-time reporting, but it's like something that refreshes every hour. Afterwards, you also have the link in here. That's the link towards the Insight service, which is enabled on the same tenant as my Automation Hub. And in here, I'm going to first focus on some templates, the ones I was mentioning about earlier. And be mindful, as I was saying, the more content you have, the more relevant it is in populating this out-of-the-box dashboards. But what matters is that you understand some key capabilities from this integration and how to deep dive on the data. For instance, in here, I was mentioning that we have this perspective of how many ideas were submitted, how many of them, are live, and ways to drill down in the data, where if you're only having like viewer role in Insights, then if you right-click in here, you're going to see for certain tiles, this capability to show, to explore more in detail by seeing in a model, what is the data behind this tile. So in this case, it displays the idea name, the auto-generated ID from Automation Hub, the slug, the URL if you want to open it in a new section, new tab, the automation ID if you fill the one, a custom one, the phase and name and the phase status name for this idea. But if you're having additional rights like designer and ROI editor, then you have another functionality in here on left 3 dots called explore from here. This actually is going to open from this style, is going to direct you towards the data model behind and the query and the visualization type, and you can deep dive into it to see exactly how it was created. So this is a first introduction, like a first contact with the data model, and I'm going to focus for a few minutes on explaining the logic behind this one. So the data model in here, this one, the automation ideas explore, is the exhaustive one we're exposing from the data model we sent in Insights. And what does it mean? Well, it contains a set of views, and under these views, you have various dimensions and measures. The way the things are connected is that some of the information exposed is being seen as a dimension of various types, strings, number, date, and time. Some things are measures because they're like you are applying some kind of a measurement on top of a dimension. For instance, how many ideas were submitted, how much time was spent in a particular phase by doing a sum of various statuses it went through. So these are measures, for instance, and dimension and measures sit under one view. For instance, this aging history one. And all these views, they are collected in one Explorer. In this case, it's called Automation Ideas. So the way the information is organized in this Explorer is that we have various entities. For instance, everything that starts with aging history is focusing on exposing information around the evolution of the idea through various phases and statuses and the exact timestamps on when these events happened. So if you want to report on top of how much time an idea spent on a particular phase and status, when did their phase and status progress. Then you're going to interact with this aging history data. Like when it was the last time it was changed, when a certain phase began, when did it end, and how much time it spent either in the phase or in a particular phase and status. If you want to see for a particular idea, things like what were the exact phases and statuses it went through, then again, you're going to interact with the aging history views and with a specific focus on phase respective status. If you want to see information around who was the author, who was the user in Automation Hub who performed a phase and status change for a particular idea, then you're going to focus on this view, and you have various metadata related to that specific user that you can surface. And that's one of the entities we're working with. So basically, a history around the phase and status evolutions for the ideas you have in your Automation Hub. Now, a second entity that we have is the concept of components, is referring to the concept of reusable components that you can manage in Automation Hub, those snippets of code that you can curate. And here it starts with a generic one around, give me the name of the component, the type of the component, whether it's still active or not. Some metadata that you fill in the reusable components form, like compatibility, benefits, some calculations around how many applications were referenced in that component, how many categories, how many comments and manuals were available for that component. Everything is generally under this all layer. But afterwards, we have additional views related to this component entity, like applications and categories for the component, and who was the author of the component, or the curator and the person who updated the component, as well as the many versions that a component might have, depending on how much content was added on that component. So that's another entity that you can interact with, and the way you interact is by first deciding what information you're interested in on that component, and then going and seeing, whether this dimension or a particular measure is relevant for what you're trying to achieve related to the evolution of your reusable components pipeline. Another layer, another entity, and the main one I would say is around the idea. Everything that is labeled as idea, you find it in here. I would like to surface things like some key information from in the idea, like the auto-generated ID, the name, the priority, when it was submitted, when it was created, if it went through the draft version first. Then the applications which are referenced in the idea, the category levels, that are referenced for the idea, because an idea, depending on how much categories you have in your structure, you can have up to 5 levels, and this is the way they are surfaced, and you can deep dive into them to see what is specified for each idea. You have the part with the phase over here, idea phase, what's the name, whether the phase is active, what's the status of the idea. You can use these dimensions. You have everything that you put in the assessments. We had our colleague Teodora showcasing 2 weeks ago how you can create custom KPIs, how you can create custom questions to collect relevant metadata for your automation opportunities pipeline. Everything is under these views with Q&As. And it first starts with the Q&As all types, where basically you can surface various questions that you define, either the default ones, and you can see the types of questions, whether they are numerical, whether they are date time, whether they are strings, text questions, percentage, and so on. But you also have, a subset of these questions, custom questions from the assessments. You have them organized, grouped in this date time types. So this is interacting with things like dates, launch date, date when it was created, or other kinds of custom questions defined as calendar type. We have a section for the default benefits, that we proposed in Automation Hub, the default KPIs around estimated savings measured in hours saved, FTEs, or currency. You have also all the other numerical type of questions that you define. They are found over here if you surface this part with the questions and the answers. Then if you are using the tags, in the automation profile, you can use them as well to surface them in your visualizations. And then we have some additional information around the process owner, the submitter, like some key information, who is it, what's their email, business department, and so on. And last but not least, there's the fourth entity around users. So it doesn't necessarily have to be users that submitted ideas, but users in general that you onboard in an Automation Hub. And based on this data, you can actually see what's their contribution on the program. Now, I will close this parenthesis on what the data model looks like what are the information exposed and what are the entities we're going to interact with. I'm going to go back to the initial out-of-the-box dashboard I was talking about earlier. So we have this one around Automation Hub ideas. I showed you how you can interact with various styles if you're having view rights, respectively, if you're having, more advanced rights. And in here, you will be able to see, this is the data which I surfaced. For instance, in this case, I surfaced the idea count under the idea view. I see that I applied some filters in here, like to exclude some statuses like archived, canceled, duplicate, rejected in here. And visualization, if I want to change it, this is just a simple tile. If I wanted to show it as a column, I could show it as like this as well. But of course, this is just a way of seeing how you can change the view without necessarily impacting the out-of-the-box dashboard. Going back to the dashboard itself, I'm going to click again like this. There were other parts besides the number of ideas submitted and the benefits that were estimated for these ideas, or for some of them. As I was saying, we have a split of ideas by business area being the level 1 category. There is another visualization in here for seeing the split of ideas by, zoom out a bit, by submitters' business unit. So that depends on who submitted ideas and, joining with this information from their user profile. What were the various sources used for submitting ideas? What was the distribution of ideas by phase? So we have a pivot over here, a pivot chart where we have the ideas on the x-axis, and then we have the various statuses for those specific phases in here as well, with a count of ideas which currently are in that phase and status. And the perspective on the users, on how many users were invited on your Automation Hub, how many of them connected at least once, how many of them submitted ideas, how many of them contributing ideas, where they are not submitters. And as well as the top of the most active contributors, and how many users are still pending to join the Automation Hub. That's the first out-of-the-box dashboard, but we have additional 2 ones, the aging report, where I was saying that we have this summary perspective where we're basically indicating how much time it has elapsed in number of days since the ideas which exist in our Automation Hub have not changed their phase and status. For instance, having ideas for more than 130 days that haven't changed their status could actually raise, some concerns. So if you dive in this data using the same capabilities, right-click and explore from there, or if you're having additional permissions, deep dive even more in the data, you can see where did they get stuck. For instance, an idea waiting review where the assessment has not started. And in this way, you can action upon it by, going in the idea, maybe tagging the process owner, asking them like, what's the problem? Why didn't you start? Adding some additional details to perform the assessment of the idea. The second view, it's more like a breakdown. It goes very granular. So you can see not only for how many days they got stuck, but in what phase and status combination they got stuck. And the most powerful one, I would say, is this detailed view, because you have for each idea, you have not only the current phase and status, but for how many days it has been in there. So if you want to, sort by this one, and you see that something was an idea approved for 450 days and it hasn't moved, that's again a point of concern, and maybe some actions need to be taken. But also we provide some predefined views around ideas that are awaiting approval because they were just recently submitted, ideas which are waiting to build a business case around them, or ideas which have a business case, but they have not reached a conclusion whether they will progress towards implementation or not. And the last dashboard out of the box is the one for the reusable components. And for this one, again, it depends on how much content you have in the tenant. For instance, in this example that I'm using, you're going to see that there are 5 components that were submitted. All of them were published, so they went through the curation process. They were collecting free downloads, and they have an average review of 4.5. There are 3 component offers over here. We have a visualization around what's the distribution of components by type of components. So we have some custom activities and some snippets, with the possibility, again, of seeing what are the exact components that fit under this criteria. Then we have a distribution by business area in here, depending on what I referenced in the component profile. The trend for this submission of components, like we had some that were submitted in May, now we have some submitted in the month of August. what applications were referenced in the reusable components, okay, based on the application inventory. What are the components which were most referenced in the automation ideas in Automation Hub, as well as what are those ideas, like how many components they are using. And of course, based on the number of reviews and the rating itself, we provide a perspective on the best rated components, because this could indicate some success stories worth being rewarded. But as I was saying, the out-of-the-box dashboards, they are just a first step towards getting a more perspective on what is the size of your automation program, what's the impact, what's the potential. I believe that the most powerful thing is actually seeing some use cases that I heard from the customers, and how we can actually tackle them with the help of this integration. So, for instance, if you're curious around the pipeline evolution, you might want to use this integration and the data model that we're exposing in those views to perform some out-of-the-box visualizations where you drill down by phase or status or categories or tags or a specific question that you have defined, custom in your Automation Hub or applications or not. You can use Automation Hub to identify bottlenecks in your pipeline, right? Like things which are not progressing. I gave some examples earlier, even in the out-of-the-box dashboard, like why aren't some ideas being approved? Because this will create friction for your users because they don't feel seen, for their contribution. Or what is the difficulty into collecting and building, the detailed assessment, the business case for the ideas, and the idea has not progressed towards the assessment phase. Or why haven't we reached a decision or certain items on which we have a business case and we have a priority? Why can't we decide whether we move it towards implementation or not? How much time we spend on average, in various phases and statuses or in phases in general. I heard cases from the customers where they want a group in a visualization, how much time they spent was spent by the idea in a particular phase or status, and group them by several ranges, because to obtain a higher level perspective. Customers are interested in using this capability in order to identify top contributors, like either business units, either individuals, how many ideas they submitted and how many ideas they collaborated, because they want to reward those contributions and identify some success stories that maybe they can replicate in other areas of the organization. You can also identify the ideas which have the higher visibility, highest appreciation, from the users. And around the reusable components, you might be interested in seeing what were the most impactful reusable components in terms of usability, the applications that were used by the reusable components, and who are the top contributors in your automation program from the RPA professional side. And the last item before jumping towards Q&A, I wanted to show you how to create some custom dashboards. I do have some use cases, and I hope I'll finish them like in 10 minutes to leave enough room for questions as well. And so I'm going to progress back to the insights part. The way to actually create visualization is either you create a duplicate, maybe you're looking at in here at the Automation Hub ideas, and you're saying, well, I want to fine tune something in it. I want to remove some titles. I want to add additional filters in here. I want to do something else. So there's an option of either duplicating this template, and afterwards you go, you edit, you modify, you build on top of it, or you can create one from scratch. And for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to actually go back to the homepage and decide to create a dashboard from scratch. And in here, when I go afterwards in it, I'm going to have a call to action to edit the dashboard. And what I need to do is actually, I'm going to start creating tiles. So I'm going to select the visualization. And the first step I need to do is decide, okay, which are the explorers I want to interact with? Because this being an Automation Hub and Insights integration, you have access to some data from Automation Hub, which fits under these two explorers. Automation Ideas is the one I presented earlier. It's the exhaustive one, which contains all the information we're exposing in this integration. The Idea Aging one only focuses on the subset around the aging history. But if you want to combine the aging history data with some additional metadata, then you might want to use the Automation Ideas one. The Insights part is focusing on orchestrator data, so it's not something that we're interacting with at this point. If I click on automation ideas, well, the first case I wanted to show you is I heard from a customer that they wanted to create a perspective where they would see the estimated benefits from the automation ideas in Automation Hub, but organized by category and by the primary reason to automate. So what I recommend to do first is try to bring in here in the data section all the pieces of the puzzle that you need to combine. So in this case, I said I'm interested in bringing the estimated benefits. So I will go in the idea in the Q&A section, because the benefits, they come from the Q&A part from the assessments. And as I was saying, we have the default benefits already exposed in here. If you're having other benefits, you can also bring them from the idea Q&A all types. So in this case, I'm going to focus, for instance, on the hours saved. And I'm going to select the per company view, so that not per employee. And I'm going to select the final one, which means that if I added, like I modified the automation potential in the cost benefit analysis, then this one would take priority. So I have this default benefits, hours saved per company, and that's the benefits I want to see. Then I said that I'm interested in grouping them by categories, case in which I'm going to go. I'm still interacting with the idea entity, and I'm going to focus only on the first level categories. So I'm curious to see what is the split of this estimated hours saved per company by categories. Already, if I run this query by clicking on the run button on the top right corner, then I'm going to see that it's going to make a calculation. It's going to say, look, for the various categories you have defined in your automation hub, you have this amount of hours saved computed for the ideas belonging to these categories. You're going to see that some of them have 0, because that means that there's not a business case for the ideas belonging to these categories. So these ones are the most relevant ones. Then I also said that I'm not only interested in seeing the benefits, but I'm also seeing like the split of these benefits depending on what was the primary reason to automate for the various ideas. So in this case, the primary reason to automate, it's a question in the detailed assessment. I'm going to go back to the Q&A. I'm going to focus on the all types. And first, I would like to be able to identify, the question and filter on that specific question. So I'm going to click on question and title, and I'm going to look for that question around primary reason to automate, and I have identified it. And if I'm curious to actually see the answer, corresponding to this question for the various ideas which have a benefit and which fit under this category, then I'm going to select answer. I'm going to select display value. And if I click on it and I hit on run, then in this case, I see that under finance and accounting, there are some, and I can also sort by this. There are some ideas which focus on the primary reason to automate as being productivity, and the amount of benefits estimated for these ideas, it's around 300K of hours per year. And these are the data, this is data that exists. But if I want to display it in a way that it's easier to consume in here, because right now it's basically taking all the categories, splitting them, by the various display values, then maybe I would consider using the pivot to pivot the data by this answer towards the primary reason to automate. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to run again the query. And what happens now is that instead of displaying different columns for each of that data, each of that combination, now I'm actually seeing that I'm having the data organized by categories on the x-axis, so that's human resources. And then I'm having this part with cost, productivity, and quality displayed as different bars. It's a bit more compact. And I also can change the settings to actually make it stacked if I believe that this represents a better way to consume the data. And in this way, I'm going to give a title, and I'm going to say this is the benefits or hours saved in a year by category and automation goal. And in this way, as I was saying, first identify the pieces of the puzzle, iterate on them and see what is the value for those, and then decide on the type of visualization. In this case, it's a column chart, and I decided to pivot by the automation goal and give a title, hit on save, redimension depending on how much you want to see it, how granular, And afterwards, you're going to see you have obtained the first visualization. Maybe going in the same direction, if I had another use case around from the customers where the business question they were trying to answer is, give me the count of ideas organized by categories and organized by development type. So in that case, again, I'm going to select the Automation Ideas Explorer because it's the one which contains most of the data. What I'm going to do is, again, bring the pieces of the puzzle. So I'm interested in the count of ideas per category. So I'm going to go in the idea part where I have the entity and the various views. I'm going to go in idea, and I have this measure around the count of ideas. So that's the first one I'm going to bring. Then I'm talking about the category of the ideas. I'm going to go to idea category level 1. I'm going to select the name of the category. So already if I run these queries, this is what's going to tell me. It's going to say, how many ideas do I have submitted? Oh, what happened over here? It obtained no results. So let me check again. I'm going to clear again. I'm going to start. So I'm going to select the category for the idea. Let's run it. There seems to be something that I'm not doing wrong. Live demos are always problematic. So maybe I'll do it in another way because I already did half of the work over here. I'm going to duplicate the tile. I'm going to click on edit and actually going to modify something that I already created. But the difference in here is that I'm not interacting with the benefits. So I'm not really interested in that one in the benefits. So I'm going to deactivate this one. And I'm actually going to go and interact with the count of ideas from here. And if I click in here on run first, it's going to create a pivot based on the primary reason to automate. And this one apparently is not working. I'm sorry. I do not know why this scenario, I cannot showcase it, but let me try to progress to the third one, and maybe they're going to have more success. Maybe it's a temporary issue why I could not showcase it. Okay, I had another scenario that I heard around. I want to see a split of how the applications are being referenced in the automation ideas. So in this case, again, I'm going to go on the automation ideas, and I'm going to say that I'm going to interact with the applications linked to the ideas. So in here, I have various dimensions, for instance, the name, the version of the application, the language, as well as the possibility of combining all of them in the application full name. So let's just say that for now, I'm going to focus on the name of the application. I'm going to click on run, and let's see what this already surfaces. Okay, I seem to have a problem with my tenant or something. Just give me 1 second to save it and refresh because it's not bringing any more data. Okay, and I'm going to click on edit dashboard again. So automation ideas, idea applications. I want to see the application full name and how many ideas do I have referenced for this particular applications. So if I hit on run, the problem seems to be persisting. Let's see if I clear the cache. In the meantime, while I debug this, maybe Sorin, do you already have some questions and something that I should focus on over here? And maybe I'll find a second environment.
Okay, yeah, we have some interesting questions. We opened up the discussion around the ROI comparison, right? Because Christopher, yeah. Okay. Christopher had some interesting questions about how we can map the ideas from Automation Hub to packages from Orchestrator or even like other objects, and then from that we kind of went further and talked about where can we get the actual values, like from queues, from transactions. Christopher, if you're still online, if you want to unmute to tell us more about this use case, we would love to hear it from you directly.
Yeah, of course. Hello, can you hear?
We were able to hear you, but now I think there's a setting that mutes us all. Wait a second.
Hello.
There you go, Christopher. We can hear you now.
Hello. Yeah. So we have a customer here, which wants to see, are we actually making money on this? And we started this customer around a year ago, and on that year, the way that we build automations differ. And the processes that we are going to deliver to them also differ. So sometimes these processes that we are automating demand that we have a queue, and sometimes it does not. So normally we would like to use the ref setup to automate our processes, because then we can measure the actual benefit based on handled queue items. But in a case where we don't use queues, there's a problem. Then we can't actually use it. Then we can't measure the benefit. And we can't look at jobs, because sometimes we have robots that are just simply starting up, looking for something, and then don't do anything. Most likely it's a dispatcher that just gets triggered by the time of day to look in an email and see if there's something for it to process. If there's nothing to process, then that's not time one in that regard. So how we actually measure benefits in this regard is depends a lot on how you build your processes. So that's this discussion we have.
So first of all, of course, depends on what are the best practices you put in place for building those automations. This question, like for measuring the ROI related to the way you execute on your automation, we're using queues or not using queues. You have the example of the automation that is just a dispatcher that is checking something. Well, that doesn't bring any value in terms of ROI, right? In terms of benefits. So if you're using queues, that's the best practice. And ultimately, what we're trying to do with Automation Hub and Insights is be able to say, look, this data that you collect in Automation Hub, well, now you have an automation, and I can pinpoint to the exact package that is being run, for that automation. And if I'm using queues, then you do have the number, the queue count, queue item count that you can use in order to know as a multiplier for the time you estimate to be saving for one successful execution. If you're not using queues, then the question you would ask first, if you're trying to combine the Automation Hub data from the idea with the package from Orchestrator, does it really make sense to pinpoint to that package, which is actually just the dispatcher making a check on an email? Because if that is not considered successful execution, then maybe that's not the right package to look at. What is the corresponding job run, which is meaningful to be counted as a successful execution, even though you're not actually using queues, right? So that's the part where, as part of our integration, and we're going to actually launch a private preview for this one in the month of September. We are asking you to do the mapping of the idea to the exact package, and actually to indicate whether you're using queues or not, because if you're using queues, then we are going to multiply by the queue item count in our out-of-the-box formula. But if you're not using queues, and we're looking at the jobs execution, the question is, like, does it really matter to pinpoint to a specific package or not? Because if the execution is not relevant for taking it into account for the benefits calculation, then it shouldn't be taken into account, and it shouldn't be referenced in Automation Hub as a package to be used in that ROI comparison. So I'm not certain if I answered or not. Maybe what I'm proposing is, if you're interested in joining the private preview, stay tuned for the second half of September when we're going to launch that integration. which basically, as I was saying, enables you to combine the Automation Hub and the orchestrator data. And in our out-of-the-box formula, we try to cover both the scenarios of using queues and not using queues. Of course, based on your data, we might want to iterate even on our out-of-the-box perspective, or enable you to customize that formula in a way that you make it more relevant for the organization, for your organization in your scenario. So I think I hope I brought some clarity on the importance of using queues and using best practices around the job's execution.
Yeah, definitely. Being able and being flexible to link these things and to tell the software how we want to do this, I think is a very good start point, instead of just say one thing covers all, because then you get very different numbers.
Indeed, our experience and research actually indicates that we cannot have one size fits all. And actually going back, because I found a second environment on which I was able to showcase the scenarios that were left. You know, I started even today's presentation with showing what is the out-of-the-box perspective on, you know, seeing the impact and the potential of your automation program. But these examples that I'm showing around, you know, what is the count of ideas by categories or reason for development type, or in this case, I was trying to showcase how many ideas are referencing what applications. You know, this is a custom scenario that surfaced with the help of the customers. So just before going back to the questions, this was one last scenario I wanted to showcase. In order to address it, I first focused on the view for the application name. I also focused on under the idea for the count of ideas which reference that application. We can see that there are 13 ideas which not reference any application, so I might want to basically exclude this one from my view. So in this case, I'm going to say that the application name should be different than no. And what I obtained by just running this query and using a column chart, it's a visualization which shows me, you know, the applications used by the automation ideas based on the Automation Hub data. And sorry for having to switch between two different environments, but it's good that I was able at least to showcase this scenario. And maybe, Sorin, if you want to surface some additional questions from the chat, it would be great.
Let's see. So I think besides this one with the ROI, I think we had one question where we actually asked for some more details. What elements can be used to create a dashboard for resource capacity? And I saw that somebody else asked also a question, like an extra question, like BA developer, QA worker capacities.
Well, first of all, is like, where do you keep track of that capacity in Automation Hub? Because there is one section under the cost benefit analysis where you can put some target estimations around, you know, how much effort is required for each profile while you're implementing the automation. And that's one information that you can use, you know, for doing reporting on top of it. But if you don't want to, you know, bother with the cost benefit analysis and its complexity, one path is to actually build custom questions where you define exactly what information do you want to keep track around, you know, capacity for implementing an opportunity, for developing an opportunity. That can be simple, like ask 3-4 questions around time needed for doing analysis, time needed for doing the implementation, time needed for doing the testing. Numerical things, you know, you keep a count and you can put over there how many days, starting time, ending time, and things like that. And those informations are going to be surfaced in here in Insights as part of this section for the Q&As that I was showing you earlier. In here, you can bring the exact questions that you're asking, and you can display their answers for each entry from each idea where it was answered. So first, try to clarify, you know, where do you want to keep track of that information in Automation Hub? And after you have clarified that, then you're going to have access to it and surface it, most probably for the idea Q&As, all types, because in here we have the various types of assessment, including the cost benefit analysis one. So I hope this brings some clarity.
Nice. Thank you so much. I think that's it with the questions. Oh, maybe one more. How about estimated one-time cost versus actual one-time costs? like if it took longer to build?
Well, I think this scenario is also covered in the documentation. I don't know whether Teodora covered it 2 weeks ago or not. The recommendation for this one is in Automation Hub, in the detailed assessment, there's a question for frequency where I ask you how often a certain manual process is happening. And you have by default, daily, weekly, yearly, and so on. We recommend to the customers to go over there and to actually define another answer option called one time. And afterwards, starting from this answer option, to actually create a branching logic where you define custom KPIs for that specific answer of one time. You can create a custom KPI like one-time benefit, and you define it as a value with the formula that you want. Again, if you make these changes in the customization of the assessment, then you are going to surface this information in here in the idea Q&A all types, and you are able to drill down that by that specific KPI that you created or that specific answer. And for instance, you can build a visualization where you say, give me all the ideas for each the answer to the question around frequency is one time, and compute me the KPI for it for estimated benefit for one-time run or things like that. So that's the way to keep track of the one-time benefits and also surface them in here in Insights.
And I'll just clarify, my question was more about build costs. Like, for example, if you make an estimate that says it's going to cost us X amount of dollars to build this idea, but it actually turns out to be X times 3, you know what I mean? Given that the idea, that the desire from a lot of senior leaders is show me the ROI. And the previous question was, showing estimated value compared to actual value. That's one side of the equation, but that's just the value side. What about the actual build costs, the one-time build costs?
Even those ones, you can go in the detailed assessment, you create 2 different sections and you say, this is the estimated implementation cost, which is an estimation, of course. You can grow as granular as you want over there with keeping track of analysis implementation. And you can create a second question that you fill in after it goes live and you actually know the exact cost for implementing that automation, which in your case proves to be like 3 times. By having these 2 perspectives, initially I promised you it will take only this amount of money to build it, but actually it took like 3 times more because that's how we saw it in the invoices. You have access to both perspectives and you can bring them in here via this idea Q&A section from the Insights integration. It's all a matter of how do you declare it? Where do you keep track of it?
Right. And I only asked that question to draw a comparison between the fact that Automation Hub allows us to add line items for developers, analysts, testers, and that's the estimated cost, right? But then there's no analogous feature that allows us to keep track of the actual costs within Automation Hub. That's something we would have to track elsewhere and then provide a bulk sum to a question, like you're saying.
I'm not certain I understand why you're saying that you cannot keep track of that in Automation Hub. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from literally creating another section where instead of saying estimated cost with building it, and you have another section called estimated cost, like actual cost with building it. There are just 2 different entries in Automation Hub, like in the detailed assessment section, for instance.
Yeah, well, I guess all I saw in detailed assessments was, add in how many BAs you're going to use, how many developers you're going to use, how many testers you're going to use, and it all correlates to that plan at the top of the ROI, at the top of the CBA page, where you plot out your plan of here's how many days it's going to take to build and whatnot. So I was under the impression that there was just basically a place where you could put in the line items for people who it's going to cost to build it, but you don't necessarily have a way to track how many hours a developer actually spent or how many hours the tester actually spent, right? That's time tracking in a different system.
Well, it depends on how granular you go, but I would suggest let's take this one offline. You have, let me show you it in the slides actually. This is our email address. Okay, so feel free to reach out to us by email. Let's take this one separately because, as I was saying, with the customization capabilities that my colleague Teodora showed 2 weeks ago in this webinar series, this scenario can be covered and you can pull this information and actually can do reporting on top of that. you don't have to rely solely on the cost benefit analysis section, which is a bit more rigid at this point. But in the digital assessment section, or any kind of assessment over there, you do have more flexibility to keep track of this kind of information without being limited, actually. So I would suggest reach out to us by email, and more than happy to organize a separate session to show it how we can do it.
Great, thanks.
Sounds good. Okay, with that in mind, thank you so much for participating today. Sorry for the glitch on my test environment. I was happy that at least I could show you on the production one. And keep in mind that we slightly changed the calendar for the next sessions, in the idea that we brought earlier 2 of the webinars happening immediately after the forward event. So if you're interested about the Open API layer, 4th of October, if you're interested in how do you reconfigure Automation Hub after you have been using it for quite some time, 18th of October. And the last one, it will be in late November, around how do you engage with your users such that you enable them and you keep them, you encouraging them to contribute in Automation Hub and in scaling the automation program. And with that in mind, do not hesitate to contact us. And yeah, I hope you'll give it a try to this insights integration and ongoing reporting, besides the customization capabilities we have in Automation Hub. Thank you so much, everyone. And sorry for the extra 5 minutes, but I hope they were good ones.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Iulia. Thank you so much, Sorin. And thank you everyone for joining. You can go back to the same event page in a few hours and check the recording. So in case you missed out on anything, and if you feel like you want to share those details or share that recording or the content with any of your colleagues, please feel free to do that. Please do join the chapter link, which I mentioned, wherein you can get notified on the upcoming events that will be published. So yeah, that's it from my side. I will stop recording. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. See you in the next session. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.